wish to read the Second Declaration of Independence. I think there are many people who are not aware that there is a Second Declaration of Independence in the United States, and it's valuable information for all of us to digest. I read it several months ago and then several months before that, but I'm still becoming grounded in the information and exactly what it means. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine, and he reminded me as I was expressing frustration about the current state of affairs that we have a Second Declaration of Independence. And while I knew that, it had not really sunk in what that means until that moment. What does that mean, pray tell, you might ask? Well, I think it sheds a lot of light on what we've been going through since the Second Declaration as well. It was originally signed on July 4th of 2020 by the then President Donald Trump. And it's fascinating in hindsight to think about, well, the original Declaration of Independence in this country, the United States of America, for America, led to the Constitution later on, several years later. During that time, there would seem to have been a lot of discussions, heated discussions, of course. I don't know that we could say there was civil unrest, but surely there were heated discussions. Can't even imagine what that was like back then. But it took a group of educated, strong men, and I'm sure they had some good women standing behind them to support that in conversation within their homes and private, that led to the Constitution. That brings me to a valid point I think is important to add here. Yesterday, one of the reasons I was expressing frustration to my good friend, his name is John, was that I had recently run across some information in learning about words that suggests the Constitution itself actually it brings the institution of slavery forward. It protects the institution of slavery. Now, I can't speak on that in detail at this time. It certainly isn't surprising given what we know about those times, but it is discouraging nonetheless. So at any rate, I was expressing frustration over this, and my good friend John was kind enough to remind me that we have a Second Declaration of Independence. And again, like I said previously, I had not properly digested what that really means. What that means is that should we choose to accept this Declaration of Independence, we have a completely new road ahead. It will supersede and be superior to that previous Constitution and Declaration of Independence should we choose to accept it. And I think for me personally, while there is a lot of work to do, we are all here to do it together, and we have a lot of choices to make. It means that we can throw off the bonds. We can throw off the bonds of slavery should we choose to do so. That does mean that we are responsible, should we choose to accept the calling of that task. So this is a call to action, and it's my way of being responsible and calling out the acknowledgement of what this Declaration of Independence truly is. And I hope that there are people who will hear the call and digest what I just did. I'm sure there are. I know quite a few already. But I think we need to make a bigger deal about this. So with that said, I'm going to read it, and we'll see what happens. A Second Declaration of Independence by the 50 United States of America, signed by President Donald Trump. I kind of wish they would have used the word for America. I'll have to see if I can find the original. Those little words make a big difference. Perhaps it was, and this was simply transcribed with the incorrect word on accident. We'll have to find out. But these are the things that we'll have to make decisions about in the words that we use in these very important founding documents going forward. To the New Republic of the United States, transcribed by Mark Bowman, 2/9/2020, from parchment paper, from original. Trusting our cause is just, and having prayed for the fortitude of brave spiritual wickedness in high places, we, citizens of America, make this announcement to the shareholders of U.S. Corp., including the City of London, the British Crown, and the Vatican, and other operatives in the media, government, and society. Medica, government, and society. A second Declaration of Independence by the 50 states for America. With the utmost respect and admiration for the founders of America and the framers of the original Declaration of Independence, the American people humbly emulate their thoughtful, measured response to certain perpetual and ascending tyranny and despotism. We too believe it is moral obligation of those privileged with knowledge and opportunity to work on behalf of the people, that the people are served best when their benefactors choose unity over division, nationalism over globalism, sovereignty over submission, and liberty over oppression, that all human beings are equal in their innate value, that America was founded under God, and that our God-given rights may not be revoked, suspended, negated, or abridged without due process. What distinguishes the Second Declaration of Independence from its progenitor is the object from which we seek independence. Regrettably, to our great misfortune, shame, and dismay, and despite the recurrent warnings and accorded safeguards, a cabal of, I think they meant cabal, of foreign investors and privateers have managed to gain possession of our land, our wealth, our labor, our well-being, our future, and even our children. Although history has become muddied with varied interpretations of cardinal events, including the surreptitious adoption of a second corporate constitution, an uncertain ratification of several amendments destructive to the people, it matters only that one or more alien groups lay claim to America and its assets. Rather than speculate on motives and weigh unprofitably to biased accounts, unverifiable information, and plenteous theories and opinions, we engage a perfect solution wherein we exact independence from all claimants, past and present, proclaimed, identified, or veiled. As such, the usurpers named in this declaration are representative and not specific or exhaustive, regardless of supposed ancestry, preceded, instrument, or process. Although simply enumerating transgressions and usurpations would suffice to justify insularity, recounting significant events reveals important facts that are missing from history. These forgotten facts add insight, perspective, and clarity, illuminating our best way forward. The inevitable Civil War destroyed America's economy, ripped families apart, and cast a questionable shadow on the future of a once promising nation. America was in trouble financially and needed a massive infusion of capital to get back on its feet. 2. A cabal of nation-building venture capitals from Europe agreed to finance America's recovery, but demanded an active role in government to ensure their investment. In 1871, mired in debt, Congress worked out a partnership in exchange for boundless financial support. The foreign investors handle America's administrative needs. 3. Although initially it seemed to be an innocuous concession, the consequences of allowing the nation-building venture capitalists to conduct America's business beyond the protections of the U.S. Constitution proved catastrophic. The investors quickly embedded operations throughout the foreign-owned corporate government, and Washington, D.C. began serving the interests of America's financiers over the people. In 1871, America effectively lost its independence, and the nation-building venture capitalists became our new masters. By the early 1900s, the foreign investors that bankrolled America controlled the major newspapers and news services, enabling them to shape what is reported and how it is framed. They had to cover their tracks before being exposed and repudiated by the people. The nation-building venture capitalists worked to soften America's imperturbable, elevated system of government. The founders had formed a constitutional republic instead of a democracy, specifically to prevent citizens in the majority from oppressing those in the minority. By doing what is best for their district or state, rather than enforce the majority will, representatives serve all citizens equally, eliminating the noise, division, and violence intrinsic to democracies. Being in control of the narrative, the foreign investors' ingenious promoted the fallacy that America is a democracy, trusting that the deception would lead to unrest and chaos that would make America vulnerable, creating additional opportunities for infiltration and manipulation. In 1913, the foreign investors established the Anti-Defamation League to slander anyone who exposed them and their infiltration into American politics. Hang on, I lost my spot here. 7. In 1913, by the way of the 16th Amendment, the foreign investors were granted the authority to tax the American people directly, something expressly prohibited by the original Constitution. That the people would willingly subject themselves to forced confiscation of their property, their labor, is illogical, putting the legitimacy of ratification in question. In 1913, by way of the 17th Amendment, the foreign investors breached an important safeguard that protected our Constitution republic from infiltration of enemy forces. Previously, senators were statesmen, appointed by the respective state legislatures as a check on the House of Representatives raiding the public treasury. Henceforth, senators would run as glorified House representatives, reduced to promising free public money and services for votes. The authenticity of ratification is unlikely because the state legislatures would not willingly surrender their authority to bridle the appetite of the people's House, not would they accede to transfer more power to the federal government, opening yet another door for the international bankers to buy the influence they need to further their grip on America. Number 9, in 1913, the foreign investors gained control of our currency by pushing through Congress the Federal Reserve Act, establishing a foreign-owned central bank system despite the dire warnings of President Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, James Garfield, and William McKinley. The Federal Reserve Act passed with the help of compromised legislators between 1:30 and 4:30 a.m. on December 22nd, when most members were away on the Christmas holiday. In 1920, Congress, by the way of the Independent Treasury Act, turned over the U.S. Treasury Department and its assets, our gold and silver, to the Federal Reserve, the central banking system owned by the foreign investors established in 1913. In 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations was formed, 11 by the way. In 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations was formed undercover, advancing America's interests in the world. In fact, the CFR is sponsored by the City of London and serves to advance the interests of the foreign-owned Federal Reserve by direction, the President, Congress, and the narrative through operatives in their news and information networks. 12. In 1925, the owners of the Federal Reserve formed the United States Corporation. Just 5 out of the 100 shares issued were identified, with the balance of the shareholders of U.S. Corp remaining anonymous. Yet the money hail leads to the City of London, the British Crown, and the Vatican. The tax dollars we send to the Internal Revenue Service go to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which are under their control. 13. The official formation of U.S. Corp set the stage for transformation of America from a constitutional republic of the people to a corporation owned by foreign interests and their families. Over the next few years, the individual states were registered as corporations as well, making them franchises of U.S. Corp. Representatives and senators neither represent nor work for the American people. Rather, they are managers of U.S. Corp. And as such, they are obligated first to serve its best interests. The president is just the president of America. He is the CEO of U.S. Corp. The abbreviated term United States was purposely used to represent both America and U.S. Corp. to blur the distinction between them. Similarly, the original U.S. Constitution was quietly supplanted by an imposter corporate, all capital letters, Constitution, that bears a similar name and appearance, again, to confuse and deceive the American people. Specifically, the Constitution of the United States, lowercase, of America, uppercase, was replaced by the all uppercase, the Constitution of the United States, with the latter's corporate statutes becoming the supreme law of America. In 1933, the U.S. federal government declared bankruptcy, and President Roosevelt, its acting CEO, signed over to U.S. Corp. America and its assets, including the people and our labor. The bankruptcy of 1933, that was arguably unnecessary, ceremonial in nature, and contrived and orchestrated without the consent of the people, completed the heist and transfer of America and its assets to the same foreign interests who own U.S. Corp. 16. In the bankruptcy of 1933, U.S. Corp. Forced the American people to surrender their gold in trade for debt notes called dollars, fiat currency that has no real value and that is depreciated continually through inflation to where it is worth just 4 cents today. That was in 2020, so it's probably worth even less now, mind you. 17. The bankruptcy of 1933 put U.S. Corp. In a state of emergency, allowing it to implement Admiralty law, made evident by the gold fringe around the American flag. When in a U.S. Corp. Courtroom, you are considered at sea and not a citizen of America. 18. In 1936, U.S. Corp. Began issuing Social Security numbers to turn otherwise sovereign Americans into trustees of corporate fictions, making our labor taxable, which would otherwise be unconstitutional. According to U.S. Corp., you are not a living man or woman, but rather a representation of a corporation in your name. 19. In 1945, the unanimous owners, U.S. Corp., founded the United Nations under the guise of spreading peace, civility, and humanitarian assistance throughout the world. Yet the true purpose is to condition citizens to recognize an international authority, a first step in establishing their promised New World Order, in which the U.S. Constitution is retired to make room for a universal totalitarian government. 20. United Nations publications, Agenda 21 and Agenda 30, reveal the New World Order agenda, calling for the end of nationalism, patriotism, private property, individual rights, the two-parent family, automobiles, air travel, and the right to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government. In keeping with their goal of sustainable development, they plan to reduce the population by over 90%. Ridding America and the world of dissidents and useless eaters. The remaining useful servants are to live in coastal communities wherein they will be stacked and packed in micro apartments. The only thing standing in the way, 21, the only thing standing in the way of their New World Order is a strong, prosperous, and secure America. To achieve their goal of world domination, America must lose its sovereignty and leadership position, and thus why the owners of U.S. Corp. Quietly work to undermine our culture, systems, beliefs, standards, aspiration, and morals, for over 100 years, employing unrestrained method and tactics. 22. With millions of dollars at their disposal every year from taxing our labor, the owners of U.S. Corp fund leftist nonprofit groups, including the Council on Foreign Relations, that work to subvert our nation and silence anyone in opposition. They ingratiate the officials and administrators who run the largest charities and organizations, including the AMA, the APA, the CDC, the FCC, the SEC, and the FDA. And they embed operatives in the State Department, the Department of Justice, and the intelligence agencies, official and covert, including the NSA, FBI, and CIA. 23. In trade for generous grants and endowments, the anonymous owners of U.S. Corp shape the curriculum and political sentiment of the public schools, colleges, and universities, ensuring the next generations, our children, harbor disdain for their country, their history, their culture, their families, and even their ethnicity. 24. The anonymous owners of U.S. Corp keep the people in the dark about the true history of America, the greatest heist and cover-up in history, by controlling public education, the major publishers, the news servicers, the airways, and the social information networks. The foreign owners of U.S. Corp prop up puppets throughout society and government, allowing them to make millions of dollars in trade for perpetrating their agenda of secrecy and subjugation of America. These traders include prominent politicians, news readers, pundits, authors, movie stars, and the heads of social news and information networks. Major sports teams, music and entertainment industries, and corporate conglomerates responsible for over 90% of the products designed, manufactured, advertised, purchased, financed, and consumed. 26. By the way of funding campaigns and fixing elections, the owners of U.S. Corp obligate the most influential politicians to further their agenda of breaking America socially and financially. They promote disdain for country, dependency on government, indulgence, lawlessness, and immorality to spoil and dishearten citizens, predisposing them to trade their sovereignty for the false promise of international, unelected government sponsored by the world elite. 27. By the way of the Democratic Party and operatives posing as television hosts, entertainers, journalists, pundits, and policy experts, the owners of U.S. Corp brainwash and condition the people to accept invalid arguments and pseudoscience that call for globalism, socialism, and godless society in which technology is our moral compass. 28. The operatives of foreign-owned U.S. Corp are deeply rooted throughout the news and information networks, academia, government, and society, colloquially referred to as the deep state, the shadow government, and the swamp. The operatives perform with a hive mind because they are guilty of treason, a crime punishable by death. They are desperate to hide their complicity, and thus they systematically target, demonize, and even suicide all who threaten to expose their treachery and malfeasance. 29. The operatives of U.S. Corp favor unbridled immigration because it is the most expedient way to destroy the country from within. Flooding America with illegal immigrants without allowing them to assimilate ensures arrogance, separation, and anti-Americanism, and anger, animosity, and conflict with the people. By design, we can also expect a steady dilution of principles, ethics, and systems that made America successful. Moreover, the majority of illegal immigrants are likely to vote for Democrats, who legislate according to the will of the foreign owners of U.S. Corp. 30. Because the free, open, largely unchained internet reveals the hidden heist of America and the criminal networks that operates in the shadows, the owners of U.S. Corp that predates the predators of crimes against America and humanity are tightly concerned about exposure. To ensure that people do not wake up, organize, and enact justice, they censor the information we see, ply us with psychoactive drugs, make us complacent with money from government, distract us sempiternal video games promote us with meaningless sporting event after another. In conjunction with skewed statistics, deceptive polls, false facts, and omission of decisive information, the owners of U.S. Corp promote anti-Americanisms and their New World Order agenda. Fake news keeps the people disoriented, misinformed, and divided over ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and economic class. Meanwhile, their debt system enslaves us, their grip ever tightens through surveillance, and fluorination, vaccinations, and other technologies are deployed to weaken any substantive opposition. 32. The owners of U.S. Corp are working incessantly to disarm the millions of law-abiding patriots who stand in the way of their totalitarianism, oppressive New World Order. By the way of orchestrated mass shootings, the owners of U.S. Corp will continue to terrorize the people until we assent to comprehensive background checks. The word comprehensive is nebulous and undefined, allowing for battery of psychological and medical testing, ever expanding until large old individuals are deemed emotionally unstable and deemed a danger to society. True to the predictions of every futuristic book and movie, patriotic Americans will be disarmed by the way of political profiling under the guise of screening for mental health. 33. Through their vast indoctrination machine, the foreign owners of U.S. Corp have convinced the people that America is a democracy and that democracy is the highest form of government. This is problematic because democracy is by definition mob rule. Democracies invariably fail because the majority mob always demands more and more public monies and services procured through excessive taxation and other socialist-like policies, resulting in economic ruin, runaway debt, fiscal collapse, and ultimately social implosion, opening the door for promised, predicted, dreadful, and ever-looming New World Order. Because sovereignty is not sustainable without exploring the ills of democracy and reestablishing our elevated constitutional republic, we are compelled to make the following proclamations. A. The word democracy does not appear anywhere in the America's founding documents because the framers knew that democracy in any form or disguise is fatally flawed, leading invariably to oppression, unrest, societal failure, violence, and death. B. All modern forms of government are elected democratically. They are differentiated only by who makes decisions after elections are over. C. In a democracy, citizens in the majority make the sales, leaving those in the minority oppressed. Consequently, a democracy is always noisy, divisive, divided, insufficient, unsteady, combustible, fiscally irresponsible, and short-lived. D. America was established as a constitutional republic. Those elected must not do the bidding of the citizen majority. Rather, they must do what is best for their district or state, despite the majority will. In this way, all citizens are represented equally, and no one is suppressed, making a constitutional republic quiet, steady, efficient, and preferred. E. Although the word democracy feels good, it is founded on mob rule, making it akin to socialism, communism, and every other tyrannical form of government. F. Finally, Article QV, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution resolves any doubt. The United States shall guarantee every state in this union a republican form of government. Having exposed the greatest heist and cover-up in history, we are able to summarize. America and its assets were quietly hijacked, and the cover-up has resulted in unthinkable crimes against the people and humanity. Allowing the hostile takeover to stand will lead eventually to complete and irreversible subjugation and eradication of truth, justice, and all that is good. This second Declaration of Independence distinguishes the United States of America from the subversive United States Corporation. It asserts that the U.S. Corp was formed illegally, that it is foreign-owned, and that its shareholders have been quietly at war with America for over 150 years. Embedded within our government, and the fake news networks purposely divide the citizenry and facilitate conflict among the nations to hide that U.S. Corp was formed illegally, that it's foreign owned, and that its shareholders have been quietly at war with America for over 150 years. Treasonous operatives embedded within government and the fake news networks purposely divide the citizenry and facilitate conflict among the natives to hide that U.S. Corp is and always has been the only real enemy of America. This second Declaration of Independence also repudiates with conviction U.S. Corp's satanically inspired plan for world governance, in addition to being of, by, and for the elite, and not the people. Their falsely advertised pseudo-utopian, unelected, totalitarian New World Order would supplant America's sovereignty and extinguish forever any semblance of liberty and prosperity. Because natural inclinations predispose human beings to being short-sighted, malleable, and easily bamboozled, one might presume the American people should bear responsibility for being swindled out of their homeland, inherited from their forefathers who procured and secured it at great expense and more sacrifice, and for slowly but steadily trading their largely unappreciated blessings of liberty, opportunity, and prosperity for trinkets in the form of unearned comforts, frivolous indulgences, and gluttonous pleasures. However, the transfer of ownership from the American people was not conducted openly and with candor, but clandestinely through calculated design and nefarious means, without body consent and unconstitutionally. That is the greatest heist in history, was effected outside the constraints of the U.S. Constitution, and that those who elected to represent America's best interests transgressed their fiduciary responsibility and exceeded their authority warrants this proclamation that the American people are rightful owners of our land, our labor, our well-being, our future, and our children for our benefit and the benefit of our posterity. As with any negotiated peace, after years of atrocities committed by parties at war, we seek neither vengeance nor demand justice for past transgressions. We simply adjure the return of what rightfully belongs to the people, and avow firmly, emphatically, publicly, and officially that America shall forever remain a sovereign nation, free, self-directed, and not affiliated or dependent upon any version or variation of the present planned or innovated New World Order. We entreat a bloodless solution wherein you cease all destruction activities, including false flag events, dissolve U.S. Corp., and other illicit legal structures and custodial instruments, return our land and our assets, including our gold and silver, redirect the tax collected on our labor back to America, and have your deep state and shadow government operatives retire, withdrawing your influence in an orderly fashion, so society continues to thrive in trade for you keeping your wealth, your position, and your heads. In response to questions regarding legitimacy, efficacy, and process, throwing off the shackles of national thraldom is elementary and unambiguous, as evidenced by the separation of 13 colonies from Britain in 1776 and the Mexican people from Spain in 1825. A formal declaration, hailed by authorized representations, procures independence that is immediate, whole, consummate, infrangible, and unencumbered by obligation, condition, or imposition. As we enter grievous territory, We reflect on the precarious road our forefathers forged when they judiciously served the political and familial ties that bound them. Our hearts are also filled with melancholy and trepidation, yet we too are resolute in our posture and positions from being confronted with no better option. Despite the manifest peril, the consequences of acquiescence are graver still, compelling us to claim solemnly our independence once again. So in support of this declaration, with its firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I would ask everyone to read that, to find it. I'll see if I can find the PDF to post it on my channel, Online on Change, in Telegram, in the chat. And if this actually gets passed around, I would implore all social media platforms to read the Second Declaration of Independence to your followers. Make them aware of what it means. We are truly in new territory right now, should one choose to accept the calling. It's time that we stand up. We take responsibility for ourselves and our future direction so that our children may do the same someday. And with that, I yield.